Luis Robert Jr. is not 34 years old. He's a young man, and people are freaking out a little bit.
No reason to.
I know, but people like to freak out because they see the name Scott Boras, and he's the boogeyman. Jon Heyman reported today that Luis Robert Jr. has signed Jon Heyman to be his agent.
Nope, Jon Heyman reported that.
Jon Heyman reported that Luis Robert Jr. has signed Scott Boras.
There we go.
BorasCorp to be his agent. Thank you, Vinnie, for
You're
cleaning
welcome.
that up.
We didn't want to make you think that Jon Heyman jumped into the sports agent business.
Has he? Do you want to break any news? Do you have a scoop?
I'm saying we don't.
All right. So Scott Boras has been in the Major League Baseball agent business for a while. Pretty notable. And he is now signed Luis Robert Jr. I'm not worried because Luis Robert Jr. signed for 4 years.
It tells me all I need to know about Luis Robert Jr. Man's confident as hell about his game, and he wants to maximize the money he's going to get when he does become a free agent. That's exactly what I felt when Dylan Cease fired his agency to hire BorasCorp, and this is how I feel when anybody fires their agent to go with Scott Boras. That tells me that person has ultimate confidence in their game, and they want to maximize their money, and that's awesome to hear for Luis Robert Jr. That has nothing to do with the White Sox. If Luis Robert Jr. wants to maximize his money in 4 years, the White Sox have the one of 30 chances to maximize his money with him. So it's a good thing for everybody involved. Money's going to be going up for Luis Robert Jr. Same thing with BorasCorp. And if the White Sox want to participate, we're all good too. If they don't, then they weren't ready for baseball then. They weren't ready for what baseball is turning into. And I'm glad that Luis Robert Jr. has seen that he is a top of the level, top of the tier of MLB talents, and you only get the best agent to represent you.
Yeah, I mean, there's, to go back to the idea of narratives, there's a narrative out there that the White Sox don't like dealing with Scott Boras, and I think I'm not necessarily sure that it has to do with the man as much as it has to do with the goal that he has, which is to try and get really expensive, really long-term deals for his clients. And particularly in the last few years, stuff like opt-outs and new features of contracts that are becoming more and more normal, but that the White Sox haven't necessarily shown a willingness to hand out in their own free agent signings. And so it's not necessarily as much about Scott Boras as, like you just said, Herb, hey, if the White Sox want Luis Robert Jr. after his current contract is over, they're going to have to pay for it. And that was going to have to be the case whether he was represented by Scott Boras or anybody else. I think right now you can look at Dylan Cease and say that Dylan Cease being with Scott Boras has not changed anything that we know of, at least, the amount of time that Dylan Cease is going to be on the White Sox. The reason Dylan Cease is potentially going to be traded right now is not because the White Sox are looking up and going, oh, he's represented by Scott Boras, we'll never be able to re-sign him. They're looking up and saying, well, this team lost 101 games last year, and the only thing we can do to get this organization back on track this offseason perhaps is to trade an asset like Dylan Cease for some minor league talent. So I think that this is, like you said, Herb, probably a really good move for Luis Robert Jr. because Scott Boras' clients tend to get really nice deals from plenty of teams. The White Sox are the ones who are going to have to change their behavior, not Scott Boras, because he's doing exactly what he's being paid to do. Mm-hmm. The White Sox, if they want to swim in that deep end of the pool, and maybe one day they'll be in a position where they can. I mean, listen, they signed a Scott Boras client a few years back in Dallas Keuchel. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not completely allergic to it. It's just that the deepest end of the pool is not traditionally where they have been in free agent signing. Luis Robert Jr., when he hits free agency, whenever that might be, he will be in that deep end of the pool.
Yes, hopefully, as long as he stays healthy and continues on the trajectory that he was after the 2023 season. And again, like if they get to a point after 2027 where they've picked up all the club options and he's a free agent and he's commanding over $300 million. That's not a bad thing. That means he's been very good for the White Sox
very much worth that
4 years.
And very much worth that contract that they signed him to already.
I mean, I think even he could do that with 1 year. I mean, he's been phenomenal. He did that once he hit that homer off Mike Fiers. I mean, I didn't pay him $88 million, but he was worth it after that one.
Yeah, and it doesn't preclude the White Sox from talking to Scott Boras and asking about an extension. Yes, most of Scott Boras' clients go to free agency, but one didn't. One in particular didn't, and that's Steven Strasburg. They signed him to extension. So it's not over for the White Sox. It is just the beginning. And if you want Luis Robert past what you already have him, those conversations can start now, and you don't have to have Scott Boras be the boogeyman in the 2028 season. You could just have, hey, we have this guy for 4 more years, and we have conversations with his agent that we can extend it for more than 4 years than that. And I mean, it's a pipe dream, but whatever. You still have exclusive negotiation rights with Luis Robert right now until 4 years from now, or if you trade before that.
Luke asked, will he be traded by the start of 2026? His club options start then 2026, a $20 million club option, and then 2027, his 29 age season, another club option for $20 million. If they were going to trade him, they trade him now. I mean, he will never be more valuable than right now.
Assuming that they're only going to go up from now, that is correct.
I mean,
but if they get to the end of the 2025 season and they are still down where they currently are, then we're having the exact same conversations then about Luis Robert as we are about Dylan Cease today.
Well, I mean, but even then, I mean, Chris Getz doesn't seem like he's ruled out a Luis Robert trade. I mean, again, he told you guys that they're listening, just in general. I mean, he didn't single out Dylan Cease. It was more you guys being like, speculating about Cease because he's been, so highly linked. But, I mean, if they made a trade for Luis Robert Jr. this offseason, I think it'd be kind of shocking because we haven't heard anything. But
I mean, he said they're not. He said at the winter meetings they're almost 99.9% they're not going to. Right?
If they get the right offer, I don't think that they wouldn't entertain.
I think
he has to listen.
Right.
Yeah.
If they're having not trouble, but they're asking for a number with Dylan Cease, I couldn't imagine the number they would and the people they would ask for Luis Robert.
But Luis Robert Jr. is perhaps a little bit more obviously worth it than Dylan Cease would be, which is no affront to Dylan Cease. It's just saying Luis Robert Jr. is an MVP caliber player already, and he plays every day.
And he's cheap, and you have him for 4 years instead of 2 years.
Correct. But that's exactly what the White Sox want right now. They want to be in the position where they have somebody for the next 4 years. They already have that guy in Luis Robert Jr.
And his pizza dining habits are inexpensive also. So you don't have to break the bank there, too.
We all silly like the mayor.